The colony of Dawnlight was more than just a settlement among the stars. For the people who lived there, it was hope itself. It stood under twin golden suns, surrounded by fields that stretched like emerald oceans, and rivers that shimmered with silver light. Children played in the wide meadows, running freely without fear. Families built homes with bright windows and gardens filled with laughter. Dawnlight was a symbol of what humanity had always dreamed of: peace, growth, and a future far from Earth's old struggles. Every morning, starships would land on the colony's main port. Merchants arrived with food, tools, and music from other human worlds. Engineers brought technology, doctors brought medicines, and teachers carried books for the young. Dawnlight was alive with voices, dreams, and the sound of progress. For the settlers, it felt as if the universe itself had finally opened its arms to them. But one day, silence came. It started with small signs. The long-range relay, which usually sent cheerful broadcasts to Earth and nearby colonies, stopped transmitting. At first, people thought it was only a technical problem. Maybe a storm in the upper atmosphere, maybe an error in the machines. Rescue technicians tried to contact them. No answer. Then the first ship that went to investigate never returned. A second ship followed. It too disappeared, leaving only fragments of burned metal drifting in the void. And then, the broken signal came. It was faint, full of static. But the message was clear enough to freeze the blood of every listener. Screams, explosions, voices begging for help, and then silence. The recording ended suddenly, as if the very life of the colony had been cut away in a single breath. For days, humanity waited. Some hoped the colonists had hidden underground, waiting for rescue. Others prayed that it was a mistake, that perhaps they had fled to another world. But when the truth arrived, it crushed all hope. Recon ships returned with images that no one wanted to see. The colony was gone. Cities were burned into black ash. The orbital stations were shattered, broken into dust. The great fields were scorched, and the twin suns shone over nothing but ruins. No voices, no survivors. Dawnlight had been erased. The news spread like fire. On Earth, people gathered in streets holding candles for the lost. On the moons of Jupiter, miners paused their work and stared silently at the stars. In the far colonies, children asked why their brothers and sisters would never come home. Over 5 million souls, men, women, and children, had vanished in a single strike. It was not just an attack. It was a massacre. Humanity wept, but grief quickly turned to fury. Who had done this? Who had destroyed a peaceful world without warning, without mercy? The answer came too soon, and it filled human hearts with even greater rage. An alien broadcast spread through the galaxy. The attackers called themselves the Valar. They spoke with pride, their voices sharp and cruel. Their message was short, but it carried poison in every word. Let this be a lesson. No human seed shall spread where we forbid it. Dawnlight is dust, and so shall be any world you dare to plant in our skies. The galaxy listened, shocked, but humanity trembled with fire. The Valar had not only taken lives, they had mocked them. They had laughed at human dreams. In that moment, the people of Earth and every colony knew one thing: this would not go unanswered. Humanity might bend, but it would never break. The silence of Dawnlight would be remembered, and it would demand an answer. The stars had witnessed a crime. And in the shadows of grief, the first sparks of war began to burn. The galaxy did not wait long for the truth. The mystery of Dawnlight's destruction ended when the enemy revealed themselves. They were called the Valar, a powerful alien empire that had long watched humanity from a distance. The Valar were old, older than human space travel, and their ships had haunted the dark sectors of the galaxy for centuries. They were a proud race, sharp in voice and cruel in heart, and they believed the stars belonged only to them. When Dawnlight fell, the Valar did not hide their crime. Instead, they boasted. Across the galactic channels, a broadcast appeared, carried on every frequency. It showed a tall Valar figure, armored in black plates with eyes that burned like red coals. The alien's voice was heavy, slow, and filled with contempt. "Let this be a lesson to your kind," he declared. "No human colony shall exist where we forbid it. You are young, fragile, and foolish. We ended Dawnlight because it stood where it should not. If you spread again, we will burn your seeds before they bloom. Accept your place or be erased." The words hit humanity like a knife. They had not only lost 5 million lives, they had been mocked for daring to dream. The Valar had turned human grief into their victory speech. On Earth, billions watched in silence. In the colonies, families held each other tightly, fearing their worlds would be next. Yet alongside fear, something else began to rise. Rage. In the great city of New Geneva, people marched with torches, shouting the name of Dawnlight into the night sky. In the domes of Mars, miners dropped their tools and swore oaths of vengeance. On the frozen moons of Titan, engineers stopped their work and raised banners that read, "For Dawnlight we will rise." The galaxy itself trembled at the response. Other alien races watched carefully. Some pitied humanity, expecting them to retreat into silence. Others feared what was coming, for they had seen the human spirit before, how it bent but never broke. In the halls of the Human High Council, leaders gathered. Admirals, generals, and presidents sat at a single table, faces pale with anger. The chamber was filled with whispers, arguments, and heavy silence. Then one voice spoke. "If we stay silent, more colonies will burn." Another added, "If we bow, our children will bow forever." The oldest admiral, a man with silver hair and eyes that had seen too many wars, rose slowly. His voice carried like thunder. "They killed 5 million of our people. They believe we are weak. They believe we will hide. But humanity does not hide. We grieve, we bleed, but then we fight." The council chamber erupted in agreement. The decision was made, not in words of politics, but in the fire of unity. Humanity would answer. The Valar.news spread across the stars like lightning. The grief of Dawnlight became a call to arms. Young men and women volunteered by the millions, not for conquest, but for justice. Shipyards that once built freighters now forged battleships. Civilian engineers turned their hands to weapons. Pilots painted the names of Dawnlights lost upon their wings. The Valar had revealed themselves as enemies of mankind. They had struck without mercy, believing fear would break human resolve. But instead they had awakened something far stronger. In every home, families whispered the same words. Never again. Dawnlight will be avenged. For the first time in history, all of humanity stood as one. Earth, Mars, the outer colonies, the distant stations, every voice joined together. Borders, politics, and old rivalries meant nothing now. Only one truth remained. If the Valar wanted war, they would have it. The enemy had revealed themselves. And in doing so, they had sealed their fate. Humanity had changed. The destruction of Dawnlight had carved a wound too deep to be forgotten. For centuries, humans had expanded peacefully, building colonies, trading with neighbors, and dreaming of a future among the stars. But now that dream had been shattered. The Valar thought fear would keep humanity small. Instead, fear turned to anger, and anger became unity. Across the scattered systems of mankind, a single message spread: prepare. In the orbit of Earth, the great shipyards roared with life. Sparks flew as new battleships were born in the void, their armored hulls glowing red under the fire of welding torches. On Mars, vast factories that once produced farming machines were repurposed to build tanks, weapons, and starfighter engines. On Titan and Europa, miners dug deeper into the ice and rock, pulling out the rare metals needed for dreadnought armor. Everywhere, people worked without rest. Not because they were forced, but because they demanded it themselves. Mothers kissed their children and sent them to training academies. Fathers lifted steel beams in the yards, their hands blistered but their hearts burning with purpose. Even children painted posters and carried banners, shouting the name of Dawnlight into the cold night air. The galaxy had never seen humanity so united. The High Command, once divided by politics and rivalries, now stood as one voice. In a great chamber floating above Earth, representatives from every colony gathered. Old arguments about borders and trade melted away. All that remained was resolve. An admiral from Mars stood and said, Dawnlight was not only a colony, it was a promise that humanity would grow beyond its chains. The Valar destroyed that promise. Now we must show them the cost. The decision was made. Humanity would not wait to be struck again. Humanity would bring the war to the Valar, and so the call went out. Every ship, every fighter, every pilot who could fly was summoned. Civilian freighters were converted into armored carriers. Old battleships, long retired and left in orbital museums, were dragged out of storage and rebuilt for war. Scientists designed weapons never seen before, desperate to give soldiers every advantage. Soon, the stars above Earth filled with ships. They came from Mars, from Luna, from the colonies on Neptune's moons, from the distant stations near Proxima Centauri. They came with banners, with names carved into their hulls, names of loved ones lost on Dawnlight. 700,000 warships answered the call. It was the largest fleet humanity had ever built. It stretched across the darkness like a wall of steel and fire, row upon row, thousands upon thousands. Each ship carried not only weapons but rage. The people named it simply the Answer. When the armada moved, the galaxy trembled. Entire worlds paused to watch as the endless stream of warships passed overhead. On Earth, crowds filled the coasts and mountaintops, staring at the night sky lit with engines. On Mars, families waved flags as the massive carriers rose into orbit. On every colony, people wept and cheered as their defenders went forth. Children asked, "Where are they going?" Their parents answered with voices heavy but proud, "They go to speak for Dawnlight." But beneath the cheers there was also silence. For everyone knew the cost of war. Fathers might not return, sons and daughters might vanish into the stars, yet not a single voice asked to stop. Humanity had been struck in the heart, and humanity would answer as one. In the final meeting before the fleet's departure, the Supreme Commander stood on the deck of the flagship Eternal Resolve. His words were broadcast to every ship, every colony, every human ear across the stars. "They destroyed one world," he said. His voice was steady, cold, and filled with grief. "They thought it would end us. They thought it would make us kneel. But they do not understand humanity. When one colony falls, 700,000 warships rise. We do not forget. We do not forgive. We do not stop. Dawnlight speaks through us, and we will be heard." Across the fleet a silence fell. Then, like a wave of thunder, voices rose as one. For Dawnlight. The storm had gathered, and soon it would break upon the Valar. 700,000 warships stood in formation, engines burning with silent fire. From orbit, the armada stretched so far across the void that it looked like a sea of stars moving together, brighter and more alive than the constellations themselves. Humanity had never built anything so vast, so powerful, or so unified. The people called it the Answer. On Earth, cities stood still as the fleet began its march across the skies. Families crowded rooftops and fields, staring upward at the endless lines of glowing engines. Children clapped and cheered, waving flags of blue and silver while their parents held them close, tears in their eyes. They all knew many of those ships might never return, but still their hearts swelled with pride. On Mars, the red horizon lit up with the departure of carriers and dreadnoughts. Thousands stood on the surface, raising their fists in silence, whispering the same words, "For Dawnlight." Even the harsh winds of the desert seemed to carry the cry into the sky. In the icy colonies of Jupiter's moons, workers stopped drilling, miners climbed out of deep shafts, and farmers in domes of glass pressed their hands against the curved walls, watching the ships leave orbit. Some wept openly, some sang old Earth songs, some simply bowed their heads whispering the names of the lost. Everywhere humanity was united. Every world, every station, every settlement, no matter how far, sent their ships, their soldiers, their prayers. For the first time in history, there were no borders, no rivals, no arguments. There was only one purpose: justice. The fleet was not only steel and firepower. It was grief made into movement. It was fury shaped into engines. Each ship carried stories. A carrier might be named after a fallen city of Dawnlight. A battleship might have the names of thousands carved into its hull. Fighters had words painted on their wings. "We remember. Never again." For the children. As the fleet passed through the colonies, the people below lit their skies with lanterns and flares, guiding them like stars on a path of fire. From orbit, it looked as though every planet burned with light, showing the fleet that they were not alone, that they carried the will of billions behind them. And the fleet moved like a tide. Command ships carried admirals who had fought in older wars, their eyes grim with the weight of memory. Young pilots, barely more than boys and girls, sat in cockpits with trembling hands but steady hearts. Marines checked their weapons, sharpening their blades, whispering prayers for courage. Engineers walked the decks of dreadnoughts, touching the cold steel as if it were a living creature carrying their fate. The galaxy watched. Other alien nations stared in awe and fear at the sight of humanity's rising storm. Some whispered that the humans were reckless, that no one should gather such firepower. Others whispered something else, that perhaps at last the Valar had met an enemy they could not intimidate. At the center of the armada sailed the flagship Eternal Resolve. Its black hull reflected the light of distant suns, and on its bow were carved words in silver, "Dawnlight Lives." From here the Supreme Commander led. His voice carried through the comms to every ship in the fleet. "Brothers and sisters," he spoke, his voice steady as stone, "we march not for conquest but for justice. We do not fight to expand but to protect. The Valar believe we are weak. They believe we will bow. They believe we will forget. They are wrong. We are humanity. We bend but we do not break. And we do not forgive." A silence followed. Then across the comms a single voice answered, "For Dawnlight." Another voice followed. Then hundreds. Then thousands. Soon, the entire fleet thundered with the same words, a roar so powerful it shook even the hearts of the oldest veterans. "For Dawnlight! For Dawnlight! For Dawnlight!" The cry carried through the black sea of space, louder than engines, louder than weapons. It was the cry of an entire species rising together, and with that cry the march to war truly began. The Valar were waiting. They had seen the rise of humanity's fleet, and instead of fear, they felt pride. To them, humans were nothing more than reckless children. The Valar believed their fleets, trained for centuries, would crush the newcomers easily. Their commanders boasted to their people, "Let them come. Their anger will be their weakness. Their ships will break against our walls of fire." But the Valar had underestimated something they had never known before: human fury. The first battle began at the border system of Charon's Reach, a crossroads of stars claimed by the Valar for centuries. Their great fortresses floated among the asteroids, armed with cannons that could tear apart moons. Fleets of black Valar warships patrolled the skies, their engines glowing red like burning coals. When the human armada arrived, space itself seemed to shiver. 700,000 ships emerged from the void in formation, covering the stars with steel. It was a sight no living being had ever witnessed. A tide of warships so vast it seemed endless. For a long moment silence filled the comms. The Valar commanders stared at the screens, their arrogance fading into unease. Then, the order came. The Valar opened fire. Blazing lances of plasma cut across the void, smashing into the first lines of human ships. Explosions rippled through the Black Sea as smaller vessels burst into flames. The battle had begun, but humanity did not falter. From the flagship Eternal Resolve, the Supreme Commander gave a single order: "Forward. Break them." And the human fleet surged like a storm unleashed. Carriers launched wings of fighters, swarming into the skies like clouds of fireflies. Battleships returned fire, their cannons thundering with light, tearing into enemy shields. Dreadnoughts pushed forward, ignoring the blows that struck their armor, as if they carried the very will of Earth itself. The clash shook the stars. Human marines boarded enemy ships, storming through corridors with blades and rifles, their battle cries echoing, "For Dawnlight." In hand-to-hand combat, their rage gave them strength, and not a single marine surrendered. Every ship fought as if Dawnlight's souls guided their hands. A pilot whispered his daughter's name as he rammed his fighter into an enemy cruiser, turning it into a fireball. A battleship captain, surrounded by Valar on all sides, screamed into the comms before detonating his reactor, destroying an entire enemy formation with him. The Valar fought fiercely, their fleets vast and disciplined. But no matter how many ships they destroyed, the humans pressed on. For every vessel lost, 10 more advanced. For every marine who fell, 100 more took his place. The tide was unstoppable. Hours passed. Charon's Reach, once a fortress of the Valar, became a graveyard of burning steel. Asteroids drifted, shattered, and aflame. The proud alien fleet that had guarded the border for centuries was gone, reduced to wreckage. When the last Valar ship was destroyed, silence fell again. Only the crackle of fires and the drifting of debris remained. Humanity had won its first great victory. On every channel, voices broke through, trembling but fierce. Dawnlight is avenged. For the fallen. For humanity. But even as they celebrated, the soldiers knew this was only the beginning. The Valar had many more fleets, many more worlds. The war would not be easy. It would be long and it would be bloody. Yet something had changed that day. The galaxy had witnessed it. The Valar had thought humanity weak, a young race that could be crushed and forgotten. But in the ashes of Charon's Reach, the truth was clear. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was fire. Humanity was fury given form. And as the fleet regrouped, their banners rising once more, the Supreme Commander's voice echoed across the stars. They destroyed one colony. We will not stop until every star of theirs has heard our answer. The war had begun, and the clash of empires had only just started. The war did not stop at Charon's reach. Once the first fortress fell, humanity pressed forward like a tide that could not be held back. Fleet after fleet of Valar warships rose to challenge them, but none could stand for long. Humanity had lost one colony, but now they fought with the fire of thousands. Every battle carried the same cry, for dawnlight. The Valar fought fiercely, refusing to surrender. Their commanders shouted that the humans were reckless, that their fury would burn itself out. But they did not understand. Human fury was not weakness. It was strength. It was a storm that only grew stronger with every loss. In the system of Zarthos, the humans crushed 3 Valar fleets in a single week. In the nebula of Althera, Marines stormed an enemy shipyard, seizing it and turning its forges to build human weapons. Entire planets that once bowed to Valar rule rose up in rebellion, inspired by the sight of the human armada. One by one, the stars of the Valar Empire fell silent. But victory came with sacrifice. Thousands of human ships were lost. Countless soldiers never returned. On the decks of carriers, commanders read the names of the fallen every night. Families wept across the colonies, but even in grief, their voices remained firm. Continue. Do not stop. End this, and so the fleet did not stop. At last, the humans reached the heart of the Empire, the Valar homeworld itself. It was a massive planet, covered in black mountains and oceans the color of blood. Orbiting it were fleets larger than any humanity had faced before. Massive battle stations circled the skies, bristling with weapons. For centuries, the Valar had believed this world untouchable, a fortress no enemy would dare approach. But now, 700,000 human warships filled its orbit, blotting out the stars. The Supreme Commander stood on the bridge of the Eternal Resolve, staring at the enemy world. His face was cold, his heart heavy, but his voice was steady. This is where it ends, not only for Dawnlight, but for every soul who has fallen. Humanity will not be slaves. Humanity will not be erased. Today we write the answer in fire. The order was given. The battle that followed shook the galaxy. The Valar unleashed everything they had. Dreadnoughts larger than cities. Swarms of fighters, weapons that tore through space itself. But the humans answered with unbreakable fury. Battleships burned forward, shredding enemy lines. Carriers filled the skies with waves of fighters, overwhelming the defenses. Dreadnoughts exchanged blows that lit the heavens like suns exploding. Marines stormed the great stations, fighting room by room, floor by floor. In the chaos, human soldiers planted flags carved with the names of Dawnlight's lost, as if to say, "We are here. We remember." For hours the battle raged. The sky above the Valar homeworld turned into a storm of fire, wreckage falling like meteors. The cries of both sides filled the comms, voices of rage, voices of fear, voices of sacrifice. But slowly, surely, the Valar broke. Their fleets shattered, their stations burned, their defenses crumbled. Humanity pressed deeper and deeper until at last the Valar leader himself sent a desperate message. His voice trembled, stripped of arrogance. Humans, why such wrath? Why bring 700,000 ships against us? The Supreme Commander answered, his voice cold and final. Because you destroyed one colony. Because you murdered 5 million lives. This is humanity's answer. Then the bombardment began. Human dreadnoughts rained fire upon the Valar homeworld. Cities burned. Military strongholds were reduced to ash. The proud empire that had ruled for centuries was crushed in a single storm of vengeance. When the fire ended, silence fell. The Valar Empire was no more. Their fleets shattered, their pride broken, their homeworld under human control. Humanity had answered. And the galaxy would never forget it. The fires of war had ended, but the memory of them still burned in every human heart. The Valar Empire, once feared across the stars, lay in ruins. Their fleets were wreckage drifting silently in orbit. Their stations were shattered husks. Their homeworld, once a symbol of dominance, was now under human banners. The war was finished, yet its echoes spread far beyond one enemy's defeat. The galaxy trembled. From the outer systems to the hidden colonies of other alien races, Everyone had seen what humanity could do. News spread faster than light. One colony destroyed, 700,000 warships unleashed. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy whispered in awe and in fear of a single name: humanity. But for the humans, it was never about fear. It was about remembrance. On every ship, in every city, people spoke the name Dawnlight. Families built shrines, children placed flowers on statues, and survivors told the story of what had happened. It was no longer just a tragedy. It had become a symbol. Dawnlight was the wound that united them, the spark that had turned grief into unbreakable resolve. The Supreme Commander stood once more before the fleet, but this time there was no order to fight. His voice was carried across the stars, broadcast to every colony and every allied world. 5 million lives, he said. His voice was calm, steady, but filled with weight. 5 million who asked only to live in peace. They were taken from us by cruelty. We did not answer with silence. We answered with fire. And now the galaxy knows. If one human world is struck, all of humanity will rise. We are not weak. We are not prey. We are one people. And we remember. Across the fleet, silence filled the comms. Soldiers lowered their heads. Some wept quietly. Others clenched their fists. It was not just a speech. It was a promise. The galaxy watched. Some alien races felt fear. Others felt hope. Many had lived under the shadow of the Valar, bound by chains they could never break. Now with the Empire shattered, those chains were gone. Rebellions rose, and many carried human flags as symbols of freedom. For the first time, humanity was not only defending itself, it was shaping the galaxy. But even in victory, the scars remained. Human ships returned home carrying empty seats. On every colony, funerals stretched for weeks. The names of the fallen filled endless walls of remembrance. Yet even through grief there was pride that their sacrifice had not been in vain. In the ruins of Dawnlight, survivors began to rebuild. New homes rose where ash once lay. Families painted murals of the fallen across the walls of the new city. At the center, they built a tall monument, a tower of white stone with a flame burning at its peak, never to be extinguished. At its base, carved into the stone, were words simple yet eternal. They destroyed one colony. Humanity answered. Generations later, children would look upon that flame and ask why it burned, and their parents would tell them of Dawnlight, of the fleet that rose, and of the vow humanity made that day. The galaxy, too, remembered. No empire dared test humanity again. Some came seeking alliances, others came in fear, but all came with respect. And every time humanity's answer was the same. We seek peace, but if you strike us, know this. Every star we call home will rise together. Every voice will unite, and we will never stop. The story of Dawnlight was no longer just a tragedy. It was a warning, a promise, and a song of defiance carried from one generation to the next. In the dark silence of space, the flame of humanity burned brighter than ever, and so the galaxy learned you can destroy a colony, you can silence millions of voices, but you cannot silence humanity's answer. Because when humanity speaks, it speaks with 700,000 warships, and with the unbroken will of a people who refuse to fall.